Hi everyone, James here from F9 Audio and the Freemasons, and what you're currently watching is a slideshow of screenshots from the first Ableton release in our groundbreaking TRAX range. TRAX are essentially fully functioning and fully customizable DAW pages featuring multi-sampled instruments from the classic hardware we've got at the studio and anything else we could get our hands on. This particular release is compatible with Live 9.1.6 onwards and will work perfectly in either Live Standard or Live Suite. House Nation Volume 1 covers classic house styles and contains 5 individual DAW pages. For added authenticity, we've sampled 95% of the drums through an original EMU SP1200. It's 12-bit soul, adding real grit and weight to the rhythm tracks. And now I'm going to walk you through 2 of the 5 pages available. Now here's the first TRAX page that I want to show you. It's called Motor City after the Detroit house sound, and already I'm sure you're starting to gather the scale of this. This is a club arrangement from start to finish. It's got an awful lot of live elements. It's elements that you can actually play. This isn't just static audio or loops. This is designed for you to dive right in and change this, do whatever you want with it, do whatever you want with the sounds. And it's a perfect way for us to actually deliver multi-sample patches from some of the classic hardware in the studio and show you these workflow tricks that I've picked up over the years. I mean, just on that one sound, you can see the amount of processing that I've got. If you like the sound of anything, don't forget to save it off using the save preset icons that are available on any of the audio racks or actually the individual plugins within Ableton. Okay, so let's dive straight in and I'll start showing you some of the sounds that make this up. Now, this particular track is pretty much built around one sound, which is a minor chord sample out of a Prophet 6. Now this is a classic house style pack, and back in the day there weren't the 24-bit sampling techniques that we're so used to now. Everything was quite low bit, and in fact the average sampler was pretty much only 8-bit, but that did add a degree of punch and weight to proceedings. And to achieve that here, we've actually sampled the Prophet 6 through Otto's fantastic Biscuit, which is a mixture of an 8-bit bit crushing system and a drivable analog filter. But that's not the end of it. You can see the amount of processing that I've actually applied here to the sound to get it to do what I want. And you'll see there's automation on this track as well. That's just creating some extra interest using some parallel delays, for example, here, as I turn this more function up. And reverb for that delay as well. And when you actually hear it in the track, you'll see why I've got all of this in it, because it just sounds huge. I've got some additional patches using the same sound but processed in different ways, and they've all been actually sent. All of these individual tracks have been sent to a track itself called the Stab Return, and the Stab Return is acting as a kind of group. Now, you may think that it's easier just to group things, but actually having a track running as a group can have its own very useful functions as well within Ableton. For example, if you ever wanted to make a stem of the whole thing, of all of the stabs going into this, all you've got to do, instead of leaving it on input, stick it in record and actually record the whole part down. That's great if you're going to take something out live and you actually want the individual parts from your production, which is why we sometimes use it. And throughout the TRAX projects, I've tried to show you as many different tricks and techniques as we can, and they're all there for you to completely dissect in the comfort of your own home. No watching tutorials on YouTube. You can actually just go through this stuff and seeing how we've pieced it together. Now, later on in the track, all of this is joined by quite a big piano sample. Now, over the years, I must have tried hundreds of different pianos within house music, and this one I'm particularly pleased with because it doesn't actually have a great deal of additional processing on to sit perfectly in the track. It is a fully live patch. You can see the MIDI notes here, so you can go in and see what I'm doing, change as much of that as you like, or just completely rip it up and start again. This is not a subtle piano patch, by the way. Don't expect loads of velocity layers. This is to cut through in modern house production. And it's got quite a vintage flavour. You can hear the 8-bit decays there fading into the background. Now, in isolation, all of this kind of bit-crushing stuff may sound a bit mad, but when you actually put it into a track, you start to realise why some classic house recordings have a kind of thickness to them. Let's hear the part in solo, and then I'll drop into the full track again. Now, to complement those core sounds, we've got some other multi-sample patches from the hardware that we got in the studio. We've got a Prophet VS here at the moment, which was used on quite a few early house recordings in Europe. This particular patch we think might have been used on Cubic by 808 State. No early house production would be complete without some string samples, and we got a couple of great patches here. You can see that I've called them strings of left, strings of right, and thick string stabs. Let me show you the thick ones first. And then later on with the high lines. And in context. And as always, these are completely MIDI. They are just to prove there's all the notes. You can jump in there, make your own patterns, make your own rhythms out of everything, make your own parts. This is the whole idea of this. And as with all of the pages here, all of these patches are available to install within your user library of Ableton, and all enclosed in its own folder with its own set of instructions for doing so. So you can pull these up as racks effectively in any one of the productions that you're currently working with. Now let's just quickly skip up to the drums, because once again this is been generated in MIDI. So we've got an entire kit here of 909 sounds that have been passed through an SP1200 and then resampled back through Neve and SSL equipment. So all of the programming that makes this actual arrangement and all of the other tracks in this release are laid completely bare for you to completely deconstruct in your own time. So here, for example, you can see how I've created the drum arrangement. What have I done at the beginning? Why have I used the toms there? Why have I split tracks? You can pull this apart at your leisure and see why I've done things and why I've affected things in certain ways. So for me, this actual release signifies a bridging point now within Soundware, because we're not just delivering you world-class sounds here, we're also delivering you technique and knowledge, and we can go far further with these pages than we ever could in any YouTube tutorial. Okay, this page is called Black Widow, and it's on the funkier end of the house tip. So I'm going to play you through a sort of short section that goes into the breakdown and back out of it, and then I'm going to talk about how we actually put it together and show you just how much of this is running live using sampled instruments and MIDI. Okay, so a totally live project. Everything is pretty much firing off as it would do in a mix. The kick is actually a piece of audio, only because we wanted to use some external EQ to get it exactly bang on. But you've got some of the SP1200 menus here, including this hi-hat set. It just 12-bit just tends to do something to hi-hats that I can't explain. A wonderful set of nice and warm claps. Now that 12-bit sound is so solid here, I've not even had to put any additional EQ on those claps. Here's a shaker menu. But the star of the show for sure has to be the live bass sample. And as you can see, it's a playable patch. Here's the MIDI notes that are actually making it up. So it's a kind of set of multi-samples from my trusty Fender Jazz Bass that I have used since the old Freemasons days. And these days I love just chucking it through as much hardware as I can get, because I'm always after that classically big and powerful chunky bass sound. I don't want it subtle, I don't want tons and tons of velocity layers, I just want it to absolutely cut through. But being a static patch, this is never going to replicate the actual movement you would get out of a real guitar being played. Now this track is in E minor and it's at 123 BPM. So we also created an entire menu of little riffs, little slides, extra notes and kind of in-between notes that you would get from a live performance at this tempo and this key. And they're laid out across the keyboard in a menu. Now I'm actually using 3 versions of this menu, some EQ'd slightly differently, some with some additional effects on, and they're all adding a bit of live feeling to the bass line. They're grouped together, so let me play you back the whole thing. We've also applied the same kind of principle to some of the synth parts in the track. Here I've got a selection of sample chords and riffs from a Jupiter 8. Let me just play you some through from the keyboard. As you can see, there's loads of them there. When you actually start to piece them together in a sequence, this is what you can get out of it. Now I've used 2 of these chord and riff samples just to build the filter section that comes out of the breakdown. So with the bass patches and the synth menu combined, we've got a ton of ammunition here to start building original productions using this as a framework. Now let's quickly take a look at the breakdown. I'm sure you heard a great deal of atmosphere going on before it actually started to kick back in. And that's because I've got this entire group of audio elements that were recorded direct in from the keyboards around the studio. So see how I'm building up the layers here of different things. And see how I might use a whole series of composite sounds to actually build up this thing floating around in the background. But then I've grouped them all together using the standard group function that you can do within Ableton. And then applied quite a serious parallel chain with a few niceties on there just to bring it all together. And I've done the same with 2 effects groups here. So here you can see a bit of EQ. Now this is actually in mid and side mode, which allows me to bring out, if I just go to the stereo part here, it allows me to EQ the mid and side portions of the channel differently. And this is the great thing about this system. You can dive in and see all of the effects moves that I'm actually making. Okay, the master channel, the bit everyone kind of obsesses about at the moment, and I've got a 2-pronged attack here. I've got this parallel chain, which we'll come to in a minute, but I'm also using the glue compressor, but not in the way that you may think. Now, the whole TRAX development posed a little bit of a problem because I'm used to using third-party limiters, the same as everyone probably, but we wanted every single one of these pages to just pop up on any edition of Live. So I'm actually using the glue compressor as a soft clipper. So I've got a utility just before it just to bring the gain down that's going into the plugin. We have found that that's working quite well. And then I've got the soft clip turned on here, and I'm using the makeup gain to hit into that actual soft clip circuit, effectively limiting it, but in a much more subtle way than it does with the internal plugin. Let me show you. Now you hear it kind of hit a crisis point there where it just started to break up a little bit, so you've just got to find the sweet spot. But now let me draw your attention to this parallel rack. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm absolutely obsessed with parallel processing. To me, it's how you get modern mixing. So we have a dry channel, in other words, the entire master's just coming through that with no effect. I've got a kind of smiley cue with a little bit of a bass lift and a top lift. Let me play what that sounds like by itself. That EQ's not too good in isolation, but when you play it with the dry signal, it all starts to come together. I've also got this smashed channel, which is quite a heavy-handed compressor. Let me just play it by itself. And you can see the gain reduction really working away there. And I've also got a parallel limiter. We found just for this track, it was really helping bring some of the drum sounds together. Here it is in isolation. Now, you'd never want to do that to your audio, but once again, the beauty of parallel is that you're running it with the dry signal. This is what it sounds like when it all comes together. And once again, the beauty of Trax is you get my workflow inside your own DAW workspace. And if you like the sound of any of these effects or any of the actual plugin settings, all you've got to do is save the preset off, make sure the name's the way you want it, and then it's always constantly available for any of your other productions. So I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough of our first TRAX release for Ableton. We are actually planning plenty more across a whole range of different styles, as it's a perfect way for us to deliver the sounds that you want and the actual knowledge. This TRAX release is available now.